dresses up like a king. Little Joe from Chicago never spent a day in school. Little Joe from Chicago never learned a grammar rule. But how he handles money makes you know he's nobody's fool.
Stop pretending,
if it comes to you.
Stop pretending,
Yes, yes.
that you'd walk a mile
Feather in the breeze.
just to see me smile.
Me, my.
Stop
The
pretending,
devil's gonna get you.
stop pretending that your future lies
My blue heaven.
in my dark brown eyes.
Me, my.
Because I took your lies with a smile and kept knocking at your door.
Mama.
You turn wild, but listen, child, it's never gonna happen no more. So stop
The
pretending,
masquerade is over.
stop pretending
Hey, hey.
that you care for me.
Body and soul.
Cause some help you see.
So help you see.
Oh, stop pretending that you care for me. Stop pretending and let me be whole, babe. You do your body, baby, you do body, leave. Stop pretending you walk a mile. Stop pretending, honey, child. Oh, babe, oh, babe, oh, babe, oh, babe. Yes, yes. Cause I took your lies with a smile and I kept knocking at your door. Satchel, you turn wild, honey child. Never gonna happen no more. So stop pretending.
Masquerade is over.
Stop pretending
Hey, hey.
that you care for me.
Body and soul.
Cause I'm help you see.
So help you see.
morning, everyone. Welcome to Negotiating Quotidian, Performing the Everyday DTSA Graduate Student Conference 2021, presented by the Ph.D. program in Theater and Performance at the Graduate Center, CUNY University of New York. We, the conference committee, Deepsika Chatterjee, Jeanette Siramoko, Stephen Cedars, and myself, Tohyun Grace Shin, want to first thank you, Professor Katia Arfara, Stefan Kaegi from Rimini Protokoll, Professor Peter Eckersall, and all the presenters and moderators. We sincerely appreciate your tremendous work, and we are all looking forward to presentations and performances you're going to share with us over the next 2 days.
Hello, everyone. This is Deepsika. It is appropriate for us to begin by acknowledging the original people of the place we occupy. The lands we occupy have deep cultural, religious, and spiritual significance. I am in northern New Jersey, the land of the Lenni Lenape. CUNY Graduate Center, our home institution, is in Midtown Manhattan, also the land of the Lenape. Through this acknowledgement, we seek a sense of well-being for all, happiness, and a sense of belonging. Next up are a few other acknowledgements. We want to thank Professor Jean Graham Jones for the Lortel funds, Professor David Savran for supporting us through the Roberts Fund, Professor Marvin Carlson's generous financial support, the Executive Officer, Professor Peter Eckersall's guidance and support, the Martin E. Siegel Center and Professor Frank Heschner and Andy Lerner, Assistant Program Officer Patricia Goodson, the Doctoral Theater Students Association, the Doctoral and Graduate Students Council, and HowlRound for archival and co-hosting support, and Thea Rogers for technical support. We couldn't have made this conference possible without such generous assistance. Last but not the least, we are grateful to all the audience who are here with us today. Next, please welcome Professor Peter Eckersall, Professor at the Graduate Center, CUNY.
Thank you, Deeps, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of the Theatre and Performance Program at the Graduate Center, CUNY. This is the 5th Doctoral Students Theatre Association Graduate Studies Conference. It's a conference that is held annually. It's organized by a committee of students who set the themes, write the call for papers, contact and negotiate with keynote speakers, organize the dramaturgy of the event, and indeed run the event. And it's part of the kind of experience of doing their work at the Graduate Center and perhaps thinking about how the knowledge that they engage with and produce at the GC is applied. This theme this year is Negotiating Quotidian, Performing the Everyday. And it's going to investigate how performing the everyday has recently changed our perception and experience of theatre and performance. And I'd like to begin with just a few brief comments on this particular theme of the conference. The everyday is, of course, much valued and debated idea in theatre and performance studies. It's intrinsic to the concept of modern drama, and is connected to the widespread rethinking of politics and activism in the arts. In the many different iterations of new waves and new left thinking that spread around the world beginning in the 1960s, but also active in the 1970s and even up into the present day in different places in the world. It brings our attention to questions of negotiating the everyday in performing arts. And these questions, I think it's true to say, have only grown in importance and complexity since those times. As my colleague Marvin Carlson has noted, quote, with performance as a kind of critical wedge, the metaphor of theatricality has moved out of the arts into almost every aspect of modern attempts to understand our condition, unquote. And in the era of post-dramatic theatre and new varieties of contemporary performance, hybridity, media, and intersectionality, and a renewed attention to the material conditions of production, the metaphor of theatricality has often been elided in favour of the quotidian, actions, real bodies, and a renewed awareness of the Anthropocene. Performance is everyday and the everyday is performance, resulting in renewed attention to scholarship, to the dramaturgical characteristics of this, and the ongoing consequences for a theatre that is constantly interacting with the diverse conditions of the everyday. We also acknowledge that the conference this year is taking place in a time of particular challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has created many challenges for people everywhere. It has intensified existing conditions of inequality, capitalism running out of control, racism, environmental crisis, and political impasse. Our everyday is indeed fraught. The scholar and activist Sabu Koso, writing about the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, writes about our future in terms of twin forces of radiation and revolution. One leads to extinction and the other to activism, and small ventures, new forms of collectivity, and new kinds of utopian thinking. In each instance, the everyday is a condition of living in this time, of pandemic, and how we imagine futures other than this. This, I believe, is the work of this conference. And most importantly, it's the work of a new generation of scholars who we welcome today, who are joining us from around the world. We thank you all in advance for your work over the next couple of days, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing all of the presentations. Before we proceed, just to reiterate Deep's thank yous. So first of all, thank you to our two keynote speakers, Stefan Kaegi from Rimini Protokoll and Katia Arfara from NYU Abu Dhabi. And also to our very hardworking committee organizers. It's a big thing to take on the organization of the annual conference. And this is work that is done year in, year out by students. So our conference committee this year is Dohyun Gracia Shin, John Ed Suyat Moko, Dipishka Chatterjee, and Stephen Cedars. Thank you to you all for the really creative thinking and careful planning for this conference. Thank you also to the Doctoral Theatre Students Association, to my colleagues at the faculty of the Theatre and Performance Program, and to the student body of the program, to Frank Henschke and the Martin D. Siegel Theatre Centre, who we're partnering with, and also to HowlRound, and to, finally, all of the presenters over the next 2 days. Thank you in advance for your work as well. Looking forward to this. So with those comments in mind, I'm now going to introduce Stephen Cedars, who's going to take us through to the keynote session. Thank you all and welcome.
Thanks so much, Peter. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed keynote speakers, Stefan Kaegi and Professor Katia Arfara. Stefan Kaegi co-produces work with Helgard Haug and Daniel Wetzel through their company Rimini Protokoll. Using research, public auditions, and conceptual processes, they give voice to experts who are not actually trained actors but still have something important to share. Stefan Kaegi is based in Berlin, where he produces documentary theater plays and performance works in public spaces through a diverse variety of collaborative partnerships. Professor Katia Arfara is a professor of theater and performance studies at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and is an independent curator of performing and visual arts. Professor Arfara is the author of the book Théâtralité Contemporaine, the editor of Scènes en Transition Balkon et Grèce for Théâtre Public, and the co-editor of Intermedial Performance and Politics in the Public Sphere. Their keynote presentation, entitled Threshold Realities, Renegotiating the Extraordinary, will be a dialogue session that bridges scholarship and practice. Stefan and Katia are eager not only to share their insights, but also to engage all of you in a productive conversation. To that end, we'd like to take a quick moment to tell our live streaming viewers and our viewers here in the Zoom room how they can send questions either during or after the keynote session.
And if you are with us here in the Zoom webinar, please find the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please note if you're willing to turn your camera on and answer the question live. And if you're watching via either HowlRound or the Siegel Center Facebook page, please feel free to post comments or questions in the chat function here. Our team is monitoring all three areas and will be sure to pass your responses along to Stefan and Katia. We hope you all enjoy and engage with this fascinating work our participants are about to present, and invite you to do so at any time during the discussion. And now, I will ask Stefan to Katia to take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. I would like to sincerely thank Professor Eckersall for the introduction and the Doctoral Theatre Students Association, specifically Gracia, John, Dips, and Stephen. Stephen, thank you also for the introduction, for their invitation to give the keynote speech at the 2021 conference. Thank you all for your work in contextualizing, conceptualizing, and organizing this conference, and especially our presentation today. So I would like actually to share with you our reflections on what we call threshold realities based on our artistic, academic, and curatorial trajectories, but also on our collaborations in the previous years in different, let's say, at different occasions and different fields all around the world. So I would like to give a little bit of background before starting to share our presentation today. So I first met Rimini Protokoll, Stefan, Kaegi, Daniel Wetzel, and Helga Haug in the fall of 2007 in Berlin during a postdoctoral fellowship. I was exploring at that time the documentary turn in the arts under the mentorship of Hans-Thies Lehmann. I was excited to dive into Rimini's archives at the Hebel Theater in Berlin. The company, actually, they were artists in residence at that time. And I had also the chance to follow into attending the rehearsals of Breaking News, this performance that gave me a precious insight into what I later called a new dramaturgy of the spectator. Later on, during my tenure at the Onassis Stegi as the theater and dance artistic director and curator, I had the pleasure of co-commissioning and co-producing many of Rimini's works, which were presented both indoors and outdoors in public and semi-public spaces, and we will share with you tonight some of these collaborations. So I would like to ask Stefan to start sharing our presentation.
Yes, Katia, I'm up for this. Hello, everybody. Is that okay? You see it?
It's perfect. Thank you. Just a little bit regarding the structure of today's presentation. It will center on three key concepts that are connected to our academic and artistic practice, and there are also the focus of this conference. So we'll first start with the first chapter on the commoning, where we'll examine mostly public works, outdoors. The second chapter will be focused on the notion of neighborliness, and we will examine the inside or the outside in the inside. And the third and last chapter will explore the notion of heterotopia via different works, both in the post-human, let's say, theater, but also on what we call performative installation. So we can start actually with the first chapter, the first part of this presentation. So acting as an agent of coming together in public. Yes, I'm sorry for this. So the first actual introductory part is dedicated to public art project, as I said before. And I would like to introduce the Fast Forward Festival that I initiated at Onassis Stegi in May 2014 and curated till the last iteration in 2019. It is a key curatorial project in my ongoing research into the contemporary living conditions and diverse models of slow curatorship. Slow curation transformed the Fast Forward Festival into a porous laboratory where embodied and collective forms of learning and making were imagined and debated over a period of 6 years. So here you can see the first public project of Fast Forward Festival, Dries Verhoeven No Man's Land. It was a project for 20 spectators with iPods who were following 20 migrants through the streets of Athens. Today, while we are still in the middle of a devastating pandemic, and while we in the West are exploring ways of rethinking digitality and proximity through disembodied socialities, I would like to suggest that together with the investigation of post-humanities, we imagine horizontal processes of rematerialization, looking back into the public space that seems to have acquired a new urgency. The renegotiation of the everyday can happen with a minimum number of visitors or one-on-one encounters, can happen in provisional structures or through quotidian gestures and micro-actions such as walking, cycling, reading, reenacting, interacting, simulating. Acting as an agent of coming together in public and semi-public spaces across the city of Athens and its periphery, the Fast Forward Festival annual platform was situated at the borders of documentary and fiction, installation and performance, new and old media, science and civic practice. Taking place in Athens during a troubled period of economic, social, and political crisis, characterized by rampant nationalism and xenophobia, the Fast Forward Festival aimed to problematize all distinctions between the private and public spheres, the ordinary and the extraordinary. Based on extensive research and fieldwork, the festival, you can see the next slide, thank you, Stefan. The festival aimed to foster a decelerated spectatorship that engaged audiences in an active perception of the complex phenomenon of a shared common space. Even if only the last edition placed common practices at the core of its curatorial statement, the Fast Forward Festival had dealt with the concept of commons since its inception. More specifically, the festival explored the urban commons, which, according to the Greek architect and activist Stavridis, has to do actually with the very meaning of space, and especially public space. And of course, here Stavridis echoes Michel de Certeau and his text Pratique d'espace from the volume L'Invention du Quotidien. So the public space, compared to other kinds of common goods, is not only something to be shared, but a system, a network of relations. Space, according to Stavridis, is a process, something to share, and a means through which we develop rules of sharing. And we can have the next slide. So walking across the city of Athens and its periphery, here you can see actually different projects that were commissioned in different public spaces by artists such as Chris Verdonk, Todd Latt, Anton Katz, and here Akira Takayama. So the spectators engage with what Stavridis calls a threshold spatiality, a spatiality that symbolizes the potentiality of sharing by establishing intermediary areas of crossing, by opening the inside to the outside, but also overcoming identity categorizations, spatial hierarchies, and exclusive forms of belonging. Functioning as more than containers of social life and shaped experiences, the Fast Forward Festival spaces, liminal spaces, as you can see in these pictures, such as train stations, bridges, parks, abandoned state buildings, ports, squares, archaeological sites, courtyards, empty parking slots, revealed the potentiality to expand, transcend, and transform their dominant taxonomy. And you can have the next slide. Performance potentialized the everyday and activated possibly future social worlds. Created collectively, the commission public project of the Fast Forward Festival invited the audience to think through and with space, not by rendering it inoperative, but by changing its actual existence, its current use. Performing space, says Stavridis, means performing potential social relations and thus reappropriating the power of commoning. Stefan.
Thank you, Katia. I think it's really interesting how you and Peter also described this, how there is a new urgency in the public space. And it's funny now to look back at certain practices that we've developed already many years ago. For instance, here you see a picture of Cargo Sophia project, which I developed together with truck drivers, where we transformed the truck in such a way that we can look at the place that surrounds us, but the places that we normally kind of rush by, or the places that we ignore. In the case, it was a lot of harbors, places where materials that we buy in the supermarket kind of transit through and where truck drivers spend their lives, and where we don't really stand still to look at, to turn them into theater spaces. So this is maybe the coming back of the common, as you call it, or of the everyday, which gets a new meaning. Utopolis would be another project by Rimini Protokoll that brings these days, well, actually this year, most of these performances have been cancelled. We'll probably do it in Cologne again. It's a project where we go to places like court places, outdoor places, where we bring together people in a situation which is not the kind of holy place of museum or theater. I'd like to go a little bit more kind of into details by showing a little excerpt of a project that is called Remote X, which maybe is exemplary for such a practice that also exactly does what you said, Katia, sharing the space, renegotiating the space, as you did so much in the Fast Forward Festival. So what is Remote X? It's a project, 50 people come together and they receive headphones. And they are actually guided through the city by a voice that is a computer voice.
Welcome to Remote Berlin. My name is Rachel. I sound a bit artificial. Sorry. I am not human, but I will try to be your friend. I'm programmed for you. I'm programmed so that you will always find your way. Let yourself be carried by the music. The others are doing it too. They join you and you flow onwards together.
So you are going, flowing together with 50 people through areas, and you are looking back at them from the perspective of an algorithm. It's a computer voice actually that is speaking to us, a kind of an artificial intelligence, and that changes our look onto the places where we spend so much time. Here, for instance, in a supermarket, where the computer asks itself, why is waiting organized in the way it is organized by humans?
Here, humans hand over money. They smile but they don't speak. They try to act towards each other in an almost mechanical way. This is how humans work, 8 hours a day. Protected by a bubble of politeness. But in the back there are people queuing. Humans make other humans wait. Each one of them hates the person in front of him. Multiplicity is a problem here. On the other side of the supermarket you can see the future. Over there, nobody has to wait. Customers are served by machines. Machines that communicate. Like me. Now go to the door and it will open for you.
As you can hear, the sound scores created by Niki, sound designer of this project, are very site-specifically adapted and kind of create a theatrical notion of our surroundings through the headphones. But the other question is the being together, the sharing of these moments of the convention, that the people that are together there, that create almost a cultural perception of the audience as it is.
Discreetly, as a slight gesture of difference. Now walk onto the street. Now turn right and walk as a demonstration in front of the cars. Lift up your object above your head. Hold it up so everybody can see it. And already you are a small, non-uniform mass.
So what we see from, what we experience from inside is a very binaural sound score of a demonstration, but we see from outside in the same moment is a group of people doing gestures that kind of turn into a flash mob. So these multiple layers of co-presence, I guess, come up in these kind of performances. And when we look into the creation of such works, a lot of negotiation has to take place. And you might think this is only possible here. We're looking at the map of remote Berlin by a lot of location scouting, because what we're actually doing in the creation process is that we're kind of de Certeau, which you quoted, would probably call it, put a red thread of dramaturgy kind of through a city, identifying certain places, then connecting them in a certain way. And you might think in these new times where we are totally confined in our local surroundings in COVID times, such negotiations can only be done locally. With this project, we tried to still be able to tour with it, but it's a totally different form of touring because we need about 2 or 3 weeks to adapt the dramaturgy to new places. Like here is the map of remote London, Buenos Aires, and Jerusalem, and we did even right after Jerusalem, I show remote Tehran. So adapting into these cultural contexts is kind of reinventing the whole script, but still kind of creating an experience that goes beyond the local, I guess. That's our interest with such a project. In Shanghai, we had to negotiate a lot around the question how much can we do this demonstration scene, which you just saw. You can imagine that wasn't easy. The same for Abu Dhabi. I think we couldn't call it a demonstration there. You saw the tour there, right, Katia? But the most difficult city, actually, I must say, here at CUNY conference was New York for us, because the spaces in nowhere I had the feeling so much privatized spaces became so expensive because the film industry seems to have hands on places with a lot of money in hand and makes them very difficult for performative activities. So this is about outdoors. This is about the commons. Katia, shall we open a moment to take a question or comment, or do you want to say something?
Yes, I think that is a good moment that we can open a little bit the floor, and we can see if there is any question till now. And I have also a question for you, Stefan, regarding the different places where you presented actually remote, because I had a chance to experience both in a European frame like Avignon or Berlin, but also in Chile, for example. And you did also in other locations. So I wanted to ask you about this. You spoke a little bit, how can you go really beyond the local while you stay site specific? What about this migration of concepts, which now with the COVID times becomes a kind of, a recurrent practice. A lot of, site specificity happens through the concept, and there are people who are working locally while the creators are in another location. I don't know if you would like to reflect on this kind of
in terms of COVID, actually, it's quite a good project. We, even with all the theaters closed down around us here, we are running remote Moscow, for instance, I think starting again from next week when the snow is melted, because it's outdoors, because it's not so much endangering. Obviously, people have to do new distances and so on. I think the international touring theater circuit has to really reflect a lot, not only because of COVID and closed borders at the moment, but also because of the CO2 footprint that we leave behind. And this is one of our projects where we can kind of tour with, but not in such a fast pace, like touring theater often happens. One day set up, next day you have the show, then you have the applause and kind of leave the city again. We have a much longer impact and exchange with the city with this kind of a project.
Stefan, I'm going to stop you here for a second. There's a question from Facebook. When you develop work that tries to renegotiate how individuals experience these normal or everyday locations, do you have an expectation for how audience will experience this renegotiation?
Katia, do you want to answer? Because you are, as a curator, obviously, you're much more sometimes in touch, I guess, with the audience.
You can also ask, you can also reflect as an artist first, and then I can also join from a curatorial perspective.
Well, what's actually interesting in these kind of projects is that because they're so participatory, we have to, before the first kind of opening, we have already to do a lot of kind of tryouts, because the spectators are not in the invisible dark. They become parts, they become almost protagonists for each other in this. They're part of the scenography or part of the common experience. So we very much do experience them. And then after the shows, we often reflect a lot about what it means to delegate decision process, for instance, which is something that happens a lot in this project, to an external being. What we've experienced with this particular project is that it's a very interesting thing for young. We had a lot of kids also running very fast through this, because they kind of like this a treasure hunt a little bit as an aspect, although it has many more layers. But I guess this layer attracts to such audiences, younger ones.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Stefan, is interesting. Let's say the how we react and we behave within this kind of ensemble, in this multitude that is created in remote X. And I remember feeling at the same time very alone, like in my own, let's say, mental landscape, but at the same time together with the other spectators, but also together with the city and the passersby. So it's interesting actually how all these projects are open to the unpredictable, and it's interesting also how you have, let's say, the audience who are taking the tickets and they are there, but I remember there were also people who were just following us without even having the headphones. So it's a kind of interesting how there are different levels of interaction and of participation in this kind of projects, how intimate can be within this kind of urban space, while at the same time communicating with outside and creating interesting connections. So I think that there is no ideal, there are not expectations. I mean, for me, the years that I was working as a curator of the Fast Forward, there were no, let's say, ideal audience. The audience, can be also different every time, and whenever you expect something else can happen that perhaps was even more interesting than that you could even dream of. And I think this is the interesting part of all the projects that are exposed in the public space and taking the risk, to negotiate and renegotiate every day, every night, and every minute, I could say, of these projects. I don't know if there is any other question, but yeah, if there is no, we can go for chapter 2. Yes. Thank you for helping with the PowerPoint, Stefan. You are the master of the PowerPoint today. Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, so let's go to move forward to the inside, let's say, to the indoors, but not theater indoors yet. So the key concept is neighborliness. And I will explain a little bit more about that through the project of X Apartments. Actually, the second part is focusing on X Apartments, an urban project that was initially conceived by German curator and dramaturg Matthias Lilienthal and has been realized in different cities all around the world since its premiere in Duisburg in 2002. Lilienthal's idea was based in Jan Hout's important 1986 exhibition at the Musée d'Art Contemporain in Ghent, in Belgium, entitled Chambre d'Amis. I will not go into details on this exhibition, but the concept was different because it was a concept originated from the visual arts, while here we are more, let's say, in time-based interventions. So I'm approaching X apartments as an exemplary urban intervention in the complex phenomenon of shared city space. And I think that we can see actually a trailer from the documentary of Alaska, a film that was produced for X Apartments Athens.
Καλησπέρα σας. Είμαι η κυρία Καλλιόπη και σας καλωσορίζω στο σπίτι μου.
Thank you, Stefan. You can find actually the whole film on YouTube if you are interested to learn more about the Athens episode. So I would like to share with you a part of the statement that we wrote together with Anna Milter, co-curator of X Apartments Athens, and co-dramaturg together with Prodromos Tsinikoris. So some of the questions that we would like to ask were, can you rediscover the city of your birth through the lives of its inhabitants? Can an art project really free itself from both the dictates of political correctness and nostalgic narratives about the good old days of ethnic homogeneity and engage with a new hybrid social identities? Does art have the power to crack open the dominant geographical narrative which has locked the public image of downtown Athens into a discourse of overarching urban blight? Can an artist work in areas traumatized by attempts to reappropriate public space, by conflicting forms of coexistence, and by extreme social phenomena? Many questions that remained unanswered, but the important was really to try and be able to open this public debate. So the X Apartments was part of the second Fast Forward Festival. We had 15 international and local artists, and we can go to the next slide, from various artistic fields: theater, visual arts, dance, film. They intervene in apartments from the 50s and 60s, as well in houses from the pre-war years. They also made use of empty spaces, homes overloaded with memories and old objects, half-finished constructions, temporary settlements, and semi-public spaces. So here you can see on the one project by Enestis Azaz on the left on my screen, and Marcus Ern on the right of my screen. So the project was based on a year-long research period that was conducted in collaboration with grassroots organizations and human rights initiatives, as well as educators, researchers, and activists. The project was structured around 2 walking tours, 2 distinct itineraries in areas of Athens that had been recently traumatized by homogenized perceptions of human geographies, and violent attacks on migrants by members of the far-right party Golden Dawn. Here you can see the inside and the outside of 2, let's say, apartments. On the left of my screen is Ann Hampton intervention, and on the right of my screen is Doris Ulich. So each of the 15 interventions operated both independently and as an autonomous 10-minute piece, but also as part of a larger hyperdramaturgy. The in-between time of walking from one apartment to another was equally important as the 15 micro-projects. The emphasis was given on the process as well as on the product. The rhizomatic structure of the project revealed unexpected affinities, conjunctures, and encounters, while remained open to the unpredictable. Participation was thus redefined as a complex relationship between the artist, the residents, the surrounding environment, and the pair of spectators in an attempt to unsettle binaries such as social efficacy and aesthetic legitimacy, or the home and the world. The emancipatory dimension of X apartments, and here you can see Akira Takayama's work with homeless people in Athens and in Tokyo, and before we had the intervention of Boris Nikitin in an asylum in Athens, in Kypseli. So the emancipatory dimension of X apartments resided precisely in this bringing together of two forms of reality, the iconic, poetic, and the raw, mundane. By clashing with the normative model of an homogeneous collective identity, this encounter brought new possibilities of coexistence and cohabitation into being. And let's see the intervention, the apartment of Daniel Wetzel of Rimini Protokoll at the Oblivion Street, number 7, where Daniel Wetzel occupied in this, it was a semi-finished building in Kypseli, is one of the most densely populated areas in Europe. It was chosen specifically for the drastic shift in its urban identity and its high concentration of multi-ethnic residents. So the small community of people who came together every 10 minutes, who had in total 25 pairs every day, so in general a small amount of spectators, of audience, related to the emptiness and roughness, as you can see, of the semi-finished construction, but also the surrounding heterogeneous urban landscape of one of this kind of very dense, as I said, neighborhood, blurring the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary, the tangible and the imagined, the inside and the outside. The objects that the owners brought from their houses, the owners of this building, such as the chandelier and the piano that you can see in the pictures, created an uncanny feeling in this space, while at the same time acted as agents of refamiliarization after the revelation of their own biographies, the biographies of the objects. On the first floor, we encountered the two owners of the building, rehearsing pieces by Bartok, Brahms, and Chopin on two pianos. So their biographies intersect with that of the caretaker of this semi-ruin, Mr. Dimitris, who lives in the only finished apartment with his mother and welcomes the audience at the building main entrance together with his cats. Mr. Dimitris asks visitors a question to consider as they go upstairs. Could you imagine yourself forgetting everything important that you have experienced in your life? Upstairs, visitors encounter information about the lives of the owners and inhabitants of this contemporary ruin, and discover also a collective portrait of the whole Oblivion Street, as you can see here. The inclusion of a resident survey in the dramaturgy of this semi-ruin, together with a daily interaction of the whole street during the preparation period and the rehearsals, but also during the performance, engage performers, artists, neighbors, and the audience in a dialogue about contemporary social issues such as precarization, povertization, racism, corruption, bankruptcy, but also gentrification, and of course, about silenced dreams, hopes, and inner fears. This real and imaginary exchange created a zone of intimacy and social possibility, however partial and provisional, that allowed it a form of intimate and proximate relationship that is illuminated by the diverse social, cultural, political, economic, religious, and gendered backgrounds of the neighborhood. A space of free exchange, debate, and lively discourse that the curator Okui Envisor calls neighborliness. I'm referring here in his seminal text on the unhomely. Neighborliness is neither coercive nor antagonistic, neither indifferent, rather an expression of solidarity, recognition, hospitality, and friendship. Stefan?
Yeah, it's really interesting to look back at the X apartments in the context where we are now, having been confined for such a long time into our apartments, mostly at least in the evenings when we have curfew here in Germany, at least at the moment. And in the same moment, obviously, going from one apartment to the other, as you did with X apartment, would be unthinkable of in COVID times. Another question that we enjoy very much working in the intimacy of such a close space like the home. We did also a project called Home Visit Europe and later Home Visit USA, actually, where we brought people to other people's homes. In the moment, it seems like being confined in the home is more like a prison experience almost. And we reflected these days again, how could we connect the homes to other places around the world? Now you would say, okay, we are connected because in these kind of Zoom sessions, we are anyway together, but our bodies are somehow not, because it's just our upper part of our bodies, it seems. We thought back of a project that we invented quite some years ago called Kata in a Box, where you went to a theater, you had a time slot, and when you opened the door all alone, you heard a phone ringing when coming inside, and see what happened.
Hello.
Hello, is this Barbara?
It is.
Barbara, this is Dicky.
Hi, Jackie.
Hello, hi. Is this Dita Maria Birg speaking?
Yes, it is.
Hi, which part of your name do I call you by? Maria or Dita?
You can call me Dita.
Hallo Ilse, ich heiße Surjodoy. Ich verstehe, das ist ein bisschen schwierig auszusprechen, aber es gibt eine Visitenkarte da auf dem Tisch.
Eine Visitenkarte?
Ja.
Ja, hab schon.
Und mein Name ist da auf dieser Karte.
Ja.
Ja?
Ja.
Also, und diese Karte können Sie mitnehmen. Ja?
Aha.
Okay.
Souvenir d'amour.
Ja, also. Ja.
So your name is Sunyana Roy.
Sunena.
Sunena Roy.
Tell me, secrets, how's Brussels? Is it raining today?
No, it's not raining. It was raining this morning.
Okay.
But it's
perfect. I mean, it was really hot the whole day. And
okay, so it's a relief that it's raining.
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
Aha.
So Isa, where are you sitting right now? Are you sitting in front of the computer or are you sitting somewhere else?
In front of the computer now.
So why don't you sit on the sofa that we have for you on the other side of the room? It's a very comfortable sofa that we have arranged for.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I try.
And
the sofa, it looks nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's nice.
The first thing I would do as an Indian would be to offer you something warm to drink. Can I offer you some tea? Would you like that?
That's really nice, and I have problems with the water here. I don't think it works, the kettle, but it's nice to offer me tea.
Shall we try and see? If it doesn't work, it doesn't, and then I can arrange for tea for by some other way.
Yes, I don't think it works because I tried it just before you called to turn it on.
Okay, don't do anything. Just stay away.
Okay, I won't do anything. Oh, now it works. It works now.
See, it's waiting for me. It needs the Indian touch.
It needs an Indian touch. So you see the protagonists of this performance are actually in a call center in India, in Kolkata. And the Indian touch is actually a USB to electricity cable wiring, for instance, this kettle, allowing the Indian performers to remote trigger, not in homes, not in apartments, but in this version in an office where you are sitting, music, printouts, or light changes, ventilation systems, heat up the space, cool it down, and you suddenly are very closely also physically connected in this way to the other side of the world.
Oh, the printer is doing something.
Yeah, I've sent you a picture, so take it out of the printer.
And through this connection, you actually suddenly had a very close relationship to people that normally in outsourcing economy, you have a relationship to, but you never see. So the kind of colonialistic version of collaboration that we live through the topic of outsourcing here comes back to you in the form of somebody that is very close to your ear, for instance, singing to you.
Make a little test. Okay, close your eyes.
Yes.
Keep your eyes closed.
Yeah.
And I'll sing you a song. पुकार लो तुम्हारा इंतजार है तुम
Well, I guess someone's looking at me right now.
Yeah, somebody is.
I see a
So only very late, actually, the camera opens up. We have to say also that this dates back to a time where Skype was still very unusual and Zoom didn't even exist yet. But the camera then later allowed people to see where actually the performers are sitting. And they were actually working in a place where all around them, mobile phones, for instance, were sold to Australia and other very different activities, not at all being so human as the connections through the telephones happened in our performance. And they were sharing the same floor. They sometimes witnessed how our performers danced with the people on the other side.
To this music. Can we? Okay, show me how it's done, because I don't know.
Okay, so you do one thing. You give me your hand first. Yeah, give me your hand. Yeah, okay, now stand. Yeah. Yeah, come a little closer. Okay, yeah, all right. Now I'm putting my hand around.
Virtual dancing.
Okay? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And now
yes.
you put I'm putting my foot forward. You put your feet backward. Yes. Yeah. Okay. And now again I'm putting forward and backward. And
So maybe you can try this kind of dancing in your next Zoom sessions with people that you're normally just sharing the upper head. We created a new version of this project in the recent months, which is called Kolkata at Home, where we said, we cannot go to offices, we cannot go to theaters, and actually the call centers also are in home office kind of situations where they're locked down. India is, I think, these days the most hit country by Corona. But can we still be connected with people on the other side? And so we created a kind of a Zoom version where we are cooking tea in dozens of different kitchens simultaneously between Russia, Estonia, where one of the performers now is at home because she moved out of India before the COVID times, and India, and places where it happens. So I think it's actually quite interesting talking about the everyday life, how the intimacy of our homes has invaded, suddenly has become a public place, and we can maybe take benefit of it. I mean, you are even at my home right now. I stop a moment the presentation here to give people the chance to come in with a comment or something.
Right. Stefan, there is a question about, I'm sorry, just one moment, just to connect with what Stefan was just discussing now about the home, Calcutta at Home. There is a question about, and I'm sorry to ask this now, and we can continue with more questions afterwards. What did you discover and appreciate now that you experience with a virtual platform and with Calcutta at Home? Is something like Zoom feels like an invitation or an opportunity? I don't know if you'd like to reflect on that now.
What's very different in this version is that it's not a one-on-one situation and that people are at home. And I think we took the decision to make it not a one-on-one thing because we felt there's too many moments where we're just with pairs of 2 and 3 or 4 people together. This possibility of meeting people that you haven't decided to meet, which the theater, for instance, is a place that offers it. This is a huge potential in this. So being at some point looking out of your window together, seeing all the perspectives of other people looking out of their windows, is suddenly a common experience that is can be one of the very few pluses in such a situation.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions in the Q&A, Stefan and Katia, and I will start the beginning from the first. So from Eylul, I heard that remote Istanbul too had issues with access to public spaces due to the total annexation of city to the state power following the Gezi protest. However, what you cannot do in one particular location may be dramaturgically significant and politically revealing. In light of the pandemic, do you think such impossibilities might be part of your future approach to space?
Well, it's a very particular situation, and I don't think remote Istanbul is totally cancelled. I still hope that we can open it soon, but it's true that it got into a little bit of a political struggle between different powers. Too complicated to explain all the details, but it tells how much the public space is always a place of negotiation between what is in the commons, as you put it out, Katia, and the privatized zones, like Gezi, I guess, stands for that transition.
Thank you. Dips, you want to read the next question?
Yeah, Jose Valdez asks, I have been wondering if there is a name for a category within intermediate performances where audience must abandon their passivity to become enactors of the artwork. Also, if you have thoughts about the displacement of the aesthetic value that results from this move, the aesthetic belonging not so much to the artwork, but emerging from the interaction between the participant and the work.
I can reflect on this. I don't know, Stefan, if you would like to join as well. I think that there is no, we need somehow it's important to overcome these binaries between the social impact of a public social project, let's say, and the aesthetic value. And we speak about, of course, notions of often of co-authorship, really collaboration, and the aesthetic value. I think that comes out from the artwork and from, let's say, its realization and its activation, let's say, by the participants that who are considered actually as co-authors, collaborators, but in a kind of, let's say, expanded notion of collaborator. I mean, there are, let's say, not only offering their homes, their houses, they are sharing parts of the biography, and they are together with most of them with the artist during the whole presentation period. So they are doing again and again, repeating and rehearsing these micro actions. So it's kind of, I mean, all the artists who participate in X Apartments, at least in the Athens episode, they share this very important moment that was also very interesting for the participants themselves, how they were able, let's say, to see their own, let's say, everydays through different lenses, somehow rediscovering their own livelihoods and their own homes, and also be able to reimagine different uses, different ways to share this their spaces with their neighbors, for example.
Thank you. Yeah, so that you want to continue, or you want to continue with the Q&A still?
Yeah, maybe let's go for this. Right.
Okay.
Katia, I hand over to you.
Yes, I can go to the hands part, but just perhaps quickly to reflect on the affects of the X Apartments project before jumping in, Stefan. And regarding the surveys, because relates also with this notion of the social impact, we cannot really measure, let's say, the impact of this kind of projects. And but nevertheless, what is more interesting is what happens after. For example, this project gave a lot of visibility in the asylum, for example, of Kypseli. They were able, let's say, to find funds, and they were not closed. It was a very critical moment for them because they were totally forgotten and marginalized. At the other hand, the homeless people that participated in Akira Takayama's project, they were able, after this project, to find jobs. So they had also a lot of offerings during the project. So these kind of micro stories that somehow help us realize the afterlife of this kind of project, which of course, if it were about to happen now, this was the second part of the question, it will be totally different. But nevertheless, I think that we can envision of doing X apartments even now during COVID times, of course, if we are not in total lockdown. But I mean, if the theaters continue to remain closed, hopefully this is not the case, but at least it's the case here in Greece, in Athens, we can imagine other ways to create, because apartment and the notion of home can be something which is also in the outside. It's not necessary that we go inside. So we can envision and reimagine these kind of intimate spaces of encounter and interaction. So let's move to the third part of Heterotopias and to the situation rooms, the performative installation that premiered in 2013 at the Ruhr Triennale in Bochum, Germany, and was co-produced by the first Fast Forward Festival. So it's a multi-layered, a multiplayer video piece that brings together 20 people from various continents whose biographies have been shaped by weapons and wars. And here you can see the set of this installation. Stefan can tell us perhaps more afterwards. So the set. Yes, you love the set, yeah. And you work together with Dominic Huber also for Nachlass that you will present to us after. I don't know if you want to say something about the set now, Stefan.
No, I just wanted to say this is not the set, this is the model, the maquette.
Yes, the model,
set.
yes, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yes,
of course, the model. And it has this labyrinthic structure, what was very interesting to experience live, I could say. So the set recreates the globalized world of pistols and drones, rulers and refugees, child soldiers and peace activists, and could be perceived actually as a fragmentary portrait of our global village, as Rimini said, and that emerges through first-person narratives and testimonies that the company actually collected during the long research period. So appropriating cinematographic principles such as close-ups, Situation Rooms develops multiple modes of perception in which the spectator can determine independently their own standpoint, differentiating between looking at something and walking in something, observing and being observed, being alone and being together. In the dramaturgy of perceiving, just to recall Marianne Varkerhofen's definition. Spectators enter the installation one by one using headphones and individual screens, as you can see. Then they followed a set of visual and oral instructions. A few minutes after a prologue in the foyer, spectators or visitors find themselves appropriating the lives of their protagonists, the absent experts. They are constantly shifting positions, slipping into the perspectives of the virtual protagonist, while at the same time interacting with other spectators who activate other environments. To give you just an example, while we are seated at the desk of a defense system manager, another spectator follows a Pakistani human rights lawyer representing victims of American drone attacks. While we play the role of a doctor carrying out amputation in Sierra Leone, in the room next door, a press photographer sorts pictures of German army missions in Afghanistan. In Situation Rooms, spectators are confronted with an extended perception of the world in between real things, objects, documents, clothes, and furniture, and virtual representations of their original settings, placed in an environment that we can call an augmented reality. The complex narratives of Situation Rooms are articulated around micro-narratives. There are micro-units that integrate a macro-narrative of what Omar Devashi calls the displaced wounds, multi-layered histories of violence and war that descend into the ordinary, structuring the ambivalence of everyday social relations. Using the analytical frame of the wound to understand the multifaceted consequence of war and destruction, Situation Rooms invites the audience to become integral part of a total spatial container filled with artificial microenvironments. Spectators engage with each environment by reenacting everyday ritual as specific spatial positions like eating soup, preparing tea, sitting in a chair, climbing chairs, or lying in a hospital bed. So we are constantly invited to react, reflect, take position. You can see the next slide. So Situation Rooms could be perceived as a hyper-heterotopic place, structured around forbidden, often invisible, forgotten or marginalized places where, according to Foucault, times that could not normally coexist are intertwined. They are real places existing in real societies that function as paradigmatic experiences of otherness. More specifically, situation rooms is articulated around what Foucault calls heterotopias of places, which usually mark crucial transformations of social identities and explore the emancipating potentiality of sharing. Heterotopias, to go back to Stavridis, may be understood as sites of osmosis and encounter, as areas in which different identities may meet and become mutually aware of each other. Defined by their porous borders, heterotopias assume a threshold character, being both present and absent in a different time, existing both in reality and potentiality. Stefan, you can take it from here.
Yeah, looking at situation rooms, I think what is special in this third chapter to me is that we're talking about projects where it's not an everyday person or an everyday existing space or a real home that becomes kind of the protagonist of the scene, but we tell the stories of people through reconstructions of their spaces. So for instance, here you have a little Russian kitchen that we're just seeing on the screen. That is not exactly, it doesn't exactly exist that way somewhere, but it kind of was created together between the scenographer Dominic Huber and in this case, it's a cook who has worked formerly for a weapon factory in Perm, Russia, and she tells her story in this particular kitchen. So it's everyday objects that are all not. It's little pictures, little objects, and this goes in a similar way for this piece Nachlass, which I created with Dominic Huber together. It's a piece where we wondered what do people leave behind when they die, and what decisions do we take about what happens after our life on Earth. I'm not talking about the religious afterlife. And here you see 8 doors. That's the center of the installation. They open when the countdowns, which you see above the doors, are down at 0. A door opens and then you go in and meet one story. But the persons are not there because when we created the work, these people were close to their end of their lives. And we discussed and created a place that could talk about their lives. For instance, Nadine Gros, we can see a little excerpt.
Asseyez-vous. Asseyez-vous. Bienvenue dans ma salle. Vous êtes confortable? J'étais si contente de voir les gens applaudir. Le jour où je me suis produite sur scène à chanter Tom Pilibi, je tremblais de tous mes membres. Maintenant, je suis devenue actrice, en mon absence. Applaudissez-moi. Applaudissez-moi maintenant, vous avez le droit. Aujourd'hui, 16 août 2015, je vais aller à Bâle, en Suisse, pour mourir. Ma sclérose en plaques a été détectée en 1990. Donner la fin à la maladie qui me fait tant souffrir, ça correspond à la fin de mon mariage destructeur que j'ai vécu. Je vais divorcer de mon corps comme j'ai divorcé de mon mari. Pour vous dire au revoir, j'aimerais bien vous chanter la chanson que j'ai chantée sur scène.
So the project was created in Switzerland, and you might know that Switzerland doesn't have one of the highest life expectancies worldwide because the hospitals are very advanced. Public health system is quite okay. But there is also the option to end your life when you want, in a particular frame, by the help of certain organizations. So that's what this French woman actually went to Switzerland to find the end of her life. And the space we created together with her to survive her is not a space that exists in her home. It's actually a space where she wanted to have been in a certain way, because she sang this song, as she says, when she was 14-year-old and wanted actually to be an actress, but she never made it there. She became a secretary and had a whole totally different life. So it's not exactly the everyday normality in her case, but it's the everyday dream of a person that it is not somebody world famous who has a mausoleum or is buried on Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris or something like that. It's almost a replacement of what could have been a cemetery. In a similar way, we built this space here from Madame Bélanger, who has hundreds and thousands of photographies without being a professional photographer, and asked at the time when we met, when we worked together, what shall these pictures become? This is the place we created with Dominique Huber for a couple. He's a banker and a survivor of the Second World War. Actually, somebody was active as on the Nazi side, and then later regretted it. And he's kind of this generation of people, of time witnesses that die of this time. Yeah, and here are other spaces, 8 together, all of them. Here we built a mosque together with somebody who is originally from Turkey, but had been living 50 years in Switzerland, but wanted his body to go back to Istanbul after his life. He has already his grave. And this is a scientist who has researched his whole life on dementia. And at the end of his life, he suddenly started wondering where does life actually end, when our heart stands still, or when we don't recognize our close people anymore. Yeah, so this is the kind of a sociological against anthropological research that a little bit is present in both of the projects that we've talked now about. And I think we should stop here rather than going to another project. I feel, Katia, if you don't mind, then we have a little bit of a moment to take questions, right?
Yes, I mean, perhaps, yeah, because then we can go to this the post-human question, and but it will be interesting also to see how we can perhaps envision to go back into the theaters when the theaters will open. But we have a lot of questions, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Stefan and Katia, we have question from Bertie, which actually is from the chapter 1, but I think it resonates to chapter 2 and 3 as well. Can you speak to the notion of access and privilege in terms of who can access different spaces in the city? Thank you.
Well, generally access, or I guess the question would ask us what kind of access do we allow people into these projects, I guess. Is that probably the question? Katia said that we try obviously to be as open as possible for all kinds of audiences. And I guess the threshold is the door is wider open when we're not asking into those spaces that are still often perceived as elitarian buildings, theaters. So I guess we are hopefully opening up more. And the other point would be by bringing in topics like, for instance, death, we just talked about. We are also addressing a topic that is really not like over academic, or everybody is concerned by it in the end. So I guess this will attract very wide ranges of audience.
And I can just add that I mean, as Stefan said, I mean, when we are going there in the neighborhoods, for example, it's the access is of course broader, because people who are normally, even a lot of people in, for example, Nick's apartments, they didn't have the experience of going in the theater when we went there, and they were really, happily surprised that theater can be also, happening in such a kind of micro scale, with modest, let's say, means. And also, just to say that this project of the Fast Forward, they had either no actually ticket entrance, either very low, just symbolic tickets, so everybody can really was able to really join.
We still have another 3 questions and 10 minutes left. You want to continue or with the Q&A?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I think so. Stefan?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you continue with the Q&A? Yes.
Yeah. Let's do that. Sorry. Altnai Scott James asks, how do you quantify the effects of X apartment project? Did you do surveys? How would you revisualize doing the project after the experience of the global pandemic?
And I think that you answered this question just before the 3rd chapter, so we can continue with the next one. Thank you.
Hui writes, thank you for sharing. I have participated in remote Hong Kong, Taipei, and Macau, which were such exciting experiences for me being an audience participant. I have a general question about global touring, localization, and language. The language choices of Remote X are English plus a local language. I wonder what is the dramaturgy to decide the local language, and what are the practical and cultural challenges of making such language choice for a localized performance?
Yeah, with the remote, it's actually quite a great option we have, because there are like 3 different transmitters, technically speaking, broadcasting audios simultaneously to the audience. That allows us in certain cities to have up to 3 different languages simultaneously being heard. The audience doesn't even get aware of it. Well, they choose when they come to see, for instance, in Antwerp, they could book the English version, the French version, and the Flemish version of the tour. And so they will enroll in one of these groups accordingly, and then they can walk along. But it's still often a topic which, for instance, which languages do you have present? And we have to struggle. I remember we had quite a struggle in remote Jerusalem with the producers, because we wanted it to be also available in Arabic, and the producer said we don't have an audience for this. And yeah, so it is obviously quite a decision which language you make it accessible. It's not always accessible in English. There are places in France where people said, well, the producer said, why we don't have guests in English, and then it doesn't need to be also in English.
Okay. The next question, I know you spoke a bit before, but which do you prefer, more one-on-one or more of a group setting like the Zoom? Which have you learned more from?
Which I have learned more from. I mean, to start with, in the one-on-one situation, it's quite a challenge for a theater director, because I don't see the performances. The performances happen really between one performer and a spectator, and they improvise big parts of it. There is quite a dramaturgy. There is maybe 30% that is clearly scripted, maybe 30% that during rehearsals we found out that it should probably rather be said than other things. But then there is a part of it which the callers really improvise as well. And we trust after our rehearsals that it happens in an intriguing and good way. While in the bigger group, there is a bit of a more common experience where we're often part of as well, and we experience it comes a bit closer to classical theater on one hand, because it's an experience of many. In the same one, it goes much more further away, because it happens without any, you're at home.
Next, we have a question from Sarah. In the projects that are based around people's life stories, how do you work with narrators? Are the selected based on the stories they want to tell? How much do you edit or curate their words for the performance? Is there something you're looking for or trying to capture in terms of the form or content of their story? What are some of the challenges in terms of the tension between their desires and expectations and the needs of the artwork?
Yeah, this is a very interesting process always, from selecting who is in such a project to what is his interest, her interest, what is, and it's not an open stage where we just allow in and people do what they want. We are clearly editing. It's a journalistic work where you select certain things, but what's much more exciting, at least for us in the process, that it's sustainable as a process, because it's not that you do an interview once and then you go home and you edit it in the way you want and you run, but you repeatedly meet again and again and again. People take the Nadine Gros that you heard, it's her voice that I recorded. So we agreed together on what she says, and then she has decided about. Katia, maybe you can comment on the social projects also.
Yes, exactly. As you said, Stefan, I mean, for X Apartments, it was a kind of long process of almost, as I said, more than 1 year. So it was a kind of a parallel research on, let's say, apartments, locations, but also discussions with activists and human rights, also workers and cultural workers, in order to define a little bit the urgencies, let's say. And it was a kind of a process of constant negotiation. So the space was part of the dramaturgy, but the form was open as well. I mean, the artists were also suggested different, let's say, locations. They met many people also from the broader, let's say, civil society, and they spent a lot of time, months, and many trips in order to be able to arrive at the final, let's say, proposal. That sometimes it worked, sometimes not. It were apartments that were not able to integrate them in the parkour. So everything was open and under constant negotiation till the very last minute. And of course, negotiation with the local authorities as well, you know, the mayors and the local local frames, which also was very unpredictable and fragile and sensitive, I could say.
Katia, we have about 5 more minutes, and then we have one more question. I'll read that out and you can fold it into the sort of wrapping up discussion. Going back to the very beginning, this is from Jess. Going back to the very beginning of the presentation and thinking forward, what are some of the new rules that you can identify with regards to social engagement / interaction, or even new dramaturgical rules you're finding in curation and performance?
I leave it to, I think that's for you, Katia.
I think, yeah, it could be for both of us, but yeah, I think that it's the works in social, in the public space are under constant, as I would say, negotiation and renegotiation. And you cannot say ever, I think, that you have the specific rules that you follow, because your own rules are questioned all the time. You can have something like a concept, but when you go out there and start, you know, speaking and working with the people, the communities, you constantly change your own perception. So I could say that there are the rules of, I could not speak about, let's say, so much rules of sharing as Stavridis was speaking about the common spaces, but more about, let's say, different frames that are all the time overlapping or juxtaposing or you know, constantly transformed, and of course now during this time, I mean, we are aware more than ever, I think, that Zoom can be a very inclusive but also very exclusive platform. So I personally am constantly thinking, how can we really create and think about forms of social engagement and of let's say artistic commitment that are not only within the Western frame, but concerns audience who are in different parts of the world, of what we call the global South, and can really help somehow reintegrate theater and performance, live arts in general, into the urban fabric. Because at this moment we are experiencing this total, let's say, distanciation, isolation of the one from the other. So I think that this kind of coming back into the public space as well, and also in the theaters, will need a lot of preparation and a lot of negotiation, because I think that nothing will be the same as before. We need somehow to reinvent ourselves and expand our tools, our old practices, transforming it into something that will be more inclusive and porous and diverse, highly diverse, I could say. Stefan, any final thought?
Yeah, I think that is very well said. I think it's really also about finding the common again. I think that is going to be a mission afterwards, and that's maybe not. Yeah, it will have new forms, but it might not be bad to have been banned from the closed theater spaces for a bit. But what we really need to trust again is that we can be together with many people and that we have something in common. We've so much been starting, I don't know, prejudging others, deciding about others without being close now, because we've been confined in our circles, in our bubbles. Their theater, I think, will have a key mission in the next years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much all.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Katia and Stefan, once again for your fantastic session and such a wonderful opening for our conference. And that's it for now, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And please note that the conference runs through 6 p.m. On Thursday, April 29th, tomorrow. And in 15 minutes, please join us again for our first session, Theatricality and Performativity of the Everyday. My colleague, Philip Wiles, will be hosting the session. And you can see our full schedule at our website, which is on the chat. Be well and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Katia.